Today, we need the fairy tales with a fantastic ending, a happy one, full of colors, warmth, and coziness. In 13th century, Marco Polo was the first connection between the West Europeans and Eastern cultures. Believe me, just to take a folklore table from a cloth in any Balkan ethnic restaurant, you'll be very on top of fashion, from the feet to the head. You can use it as a scarf for the head, as a bra for the front, as a scarf for the shoulders, as a skirt, or just as a bag. For many designers around the world, the Balkan aesthetics show fresh ideas, bio ideas, a very colorful therapy, an ability to find ready formulas, to find new configurations. This isn't called really plagiarism. The fashion houses have been doing that for ages. The hippies are the first ones which adapt the colorful belts, collars, the colorful ends of pants and skirts. The interest towards the non-culture has been obvious since the beginning of the 20th century. For this clothing, there isn't really a season, special occasion, age. They just show happiness. Everyone in national clothing looks noticed and politically correct and dynamic, which is really fashionable right now. The costumes of silk, leather, wool aren't really replicas. They don't really bring a nostalgic thought, but bring a multicultural society together. The costumes of silk, leather, wool aren't replicas from national clothing from Romania, Greece, Turkey, or Bulgaria. For example, the Swiss Guards in Vatican, or the Christian Dior exhibition, who is the greatest theft of Balkan motifs. So, the costume local dress are an absolute archetype. I think that modern man can look deeper in himself to understand who he really is. Fashion is nothing but a constant changing trend. Did you know that the world is raised with traditions, and by itself it needs traditions? For many years I've been interested in fashion, and now for many years traditions have been a crucial part of the fashion industry. The traditions of a country not only underlines the evolution of the country's nation, but also the materials that have been used. I believe that fashion and traditions is not only a way of showing the newest trend or making sure to satisfy customer, but also to have a really good understanding in the core, which is hidden behind the core values and of a tradition of a certain country. Amazingly, fashion has been my passion since I was 14, and now 5 years have been passed. When I was a small child, I've been attended multiple catwalks. Now being all grown up, I want to discover my real passion and improve my understanding for it. I've been interested in fashion because this is really the only way I can truly express myself out loud. I'm from Bulgaria, and here the folklore is very valued. Besides that, some of the world's most famous clothing is based on patterns found in Bulgarian and Balkan cultures. The Balkan cultures are one of the oldest still existing cultures in the world, all the way back from the classical antiquity, all the way now to the 21st century. So, traditional clothing in different Balkan countries is very similar. For thousands of years, it has developed for what is called now the Balkan, which consists of very specific motifs, ornaments, and meanings. For example, each Bulgarian costume has very deep meanings and messages implemented deeply in it. The female costumes are usually more colorful and visually interesting than the male costumes. The Balkan national clothing contains of elements and motifs which can be observed through time. As the Balkans have changed through history, so have the traditional fashion clothing. In the beginning, clothing represented the fertile farmlands like shown above. This is an example of the first national clothing discovered, which is called the Sukman dress. Every region in Bulgaria has shared most of its characteristics of the dress, but in contrast to every region has its own varieties and ornaments. In some places it can be found sleeveless, and depending on the region, or in the picture with long sleeves. For example, here the bridal national clothing called the Diplo from the Rhodop Mountains is from the early 18th century, which represents richness because of the crown and different colorful patterns, which represents prosperity in life. Another example of rich clothing is the Macedonian wedding dress from the Prilep region. Here the bride is filled with coins which represent prosperity and good life. The flowers on the head represent beauty and bloom. One of the most important components is the buckles with clips. This item plays a role of the belt which has survived almost in all Balkan national clothing throughout the whole time. So, leaving the old clothes aside, I will travel to the future where very famous brands have shifted the old clothing and created new styles using the old designs and principles. Nowadays, designers and manufacturers produce old clothing and accessories in accordance to a culture of a particular region. Since fashion is influenced by culture immensely, the very first example I will show you is from the 2009 John Galliano ready-to-wear collection, where the designer has been inspired by the Russian Balkan cultures. In this picture, there has been an immense amount of research on pannier-hipped, full-skirted coats, balloon-sleeved pleasant blouses, hairdresses, and pomp-trimmed cross-laced boots. Next up are some examples from the Gucci, Dior, and Chanel. Interestingly, every fashion designer interprets the national Balkan clothing in different ways. That not only means that fashion houses have their own way of creating their pieces, which is normal, but different clothing give different inspirations to people, and the same piece of clothing can give different perspective to people. For example, Vivienne Westwood translates the Turkish harem pants, which are a sign of the Eastern cultures, into a very classical and unique look. Christian Dior, on the other hand, maintains the look of a very Turkish traditional costume. Also, John Galliano, inspired by the ornaments of the Slavic brides, represents his costume like creations in a very traditional way. He utilizes the silver coins known as pendari, a large decorative belt buckles in Bulgarian called the pafti, which is a very identifiable in Bulgarian and Macedonian cultures. In very similar manner, Tao integrates embroidery motifs which hundreds of years ago would have represented various symbols and different groups of people and their customs. The really unique look of Chanel's headpieces is very clearly inspired by the rich folklore of Russia, which is not a Balkan country but shares a big amount of its traditions with the Balkan ones. Gucci and Kenzo also brilliantly incorporate the folklore of Russian and surrounding republics into their collections, which is inspired by the babushka and matryoshka. So, through my 4 years of experience in fashion, I've gained an immense amount of knowledge about how fashion changes throughout time, and the world is really constructed in order to keep up with fashion every single second. Traditions are the core of every country's fashion, and traditions are the core of the change of our shifting world, because they will be always remembered, and people rely on them to create new fashion. As much as fashion is timeless, traditions and the way of looking at the past will be always in a new perspective. So do you think traditions are time traveling?